My name's Tim Brenneman. I'm a plant pathologist at the University of Georgia, and I work primarily on diseases of peanut. And we've had some interesting events in the peanut disease management arena. This year has been a very hot year in South Georgia. We've had record high temperatures. And anytime you change the environment that much, that also changes the pathogens and the interactions with the plants. So we're seeing a different spectrum of disease than we sometimes deal with. And one of the diseases that has been noticeably less is CBR, or Cylindrocladium black rot. And that's a root infecting pathogen. It stays in the soil and it infects the roots under very cool, wet conditions. And we have not had many conditions this summer that match that. So fields that have had a lot of CBR in the past, where it's been really our main concern for growing peanuts, we are seeing almost no disease development in that regard with that pathogen. Undoubtedly, the fungus is still there. It hasn't gone away, and we're going to need to keep in mind that it's still there in future seasons. I think there's probably a couple reasons that have contributed to the fact that we're not seeing as much. One would be, as I mentioned, the real hot temperatures. I think another thing that's probably involved is the late plantings. Over the years, we've gone to later and later plantings due to the occurrence of tomato spotted wilt virus. And the more later you plant in the season, the warmer the soils are. Again, you have less likelihood of the cool, wet soil conditions that are favorable. And so late plantings, overall high temperatures, both those have contributed to the decrease in CBR. Now, a lot of our growers don't like to plant late. Many of our growers, especially those that have cotton, would love to get in there in April, plant their peanuts, then go on to the cotton. It works a lot better at harvest time between the two crops. And so there's been a big push to move that planting date back up into April. With some of the more resistant varieties we have to tomato spotted wilt, that's probably a possibility to do to some degree. You still need to make sure your other practices are in line and you get a good stand and do the other things in the risk index. But I'm sure regardless, we're going to see some earlier plantings of peanuts, and that will probably put us at risk again of CBR if we get back into some cooler temperatures, which hopefully we will. So it's a changing environment. We have some of the same diseases present, but the importance of those is changing over the years, and we need to keep that in mind as we're managing disease each year, introducing the new varieties. It's very important that we understand the susceptibility of all these new varieties, because when a variety is released, it gets planted in many different areas around the state. Some areas have a lot more disease pressure from one disease or another, and so one of the big things we're trying to do is to help growers understand the difference in these new cultivars so they use them in the most appropriate places. And the diseases that I mentioned are two of the ones we deal with the most. White mold or stem rot is also a real important one, and that's one that is actually increasing in importance with the real hot temperatures we've had this year. The CBR was greatly decreased, but the white mold was greatly increased. So really our #1 disease problem this past year was white mold, and that's been probably the greatest struggle for most growers in terms of disease management in 2010 on peanuts.